The Barn and the Book. Chapter 8, Part 1. Macrina had missed church for 2 weeks. It was because of bronchitis. Grace knew this because she lived next door to Macrina, and Macrina's mother had told Grace's mother that Macrina had bronchitis. Grace had asked her mother what bronchitis was because she'd never heard of it and it sounded important. Sort of like a dinosaur, but apparently not as much fun. "It's like a very, very bad cold," said Grace's mother. "Macrina had a fever and a big cough, and she lost her voice completely for days." "She lost her voice?" Grace's mama nodded. "Yes, she did. She couldn't talk at all, poor lamb." Grace stared at her mother. She couldn't even imagine Macrina without a voice. It seemed like Macrina would evaporate into thin air if she couldn't talk. "Maybe you could make her a get-well card," suggested Grace's mother. So Grace got out her colored pencils and drew a picture of Macrina talking on one side of the paper and wrote, "I bet you can't wait to talk again," on the other side of the paper. She stared at the paper for a few minutes. There was still room to write more, and Grace's mother would probably tell her to write more. Grace's mother always liked Grace to be thorough. Grace had written her first sentence in green, but she decided this next bit of writing should be in bright magenta. "You can't believe what happened at Sunday school while you were gone. Get well soon, Grace." These 2 sentences took Grace several minutes to write. She liked writing, but she liked to mumble the words to herself as she wrote, and take time to make each letter fancy. Grace held up the paper. It was now full. She slid off her bed, where she had been sitting with her art box and a clipboard, and went downstairs to show the card to her mother. "That's nice, dear, but you didn't tell her what happened." "It's okay," said Grace. "It will help her be interested to come back." Grace's mother laughed. Sure enough, Macrina was back at church 3 days later. Probably it was because she was better, but Grace liked to think that her card had something to do with it. When the service ended, the families walked across to the refectory for lunch before their afternoon of work at the monastery. Grace searched through the crowd until she found Macrina walking along behind her parents. Even for the short walk from church to lunch, Macrina was bundled up in her coat, with a hat on under the hood, a woolly scarf, and gloves. "Hi, Macrina!" Macrina turned sideways to see who was talking to her. She was so bundled up that she couldn't turn her head. "Hello, Grace." She reached up to pull the scarf down from over her mouth. "Thank you for the nice card. My mom gave it to me." Grace smiled happily. "You're welcome." They walked a few steps more and had almost reached the refectory door when Macrina spoke again. "Do you want to sit with me at lunch?" "Sure." Grace gave a little skip. She was now even more certain that her card had brought Macrina back to health. Why else would Macrina want to sit with her? Grace scurried off to pick up her lunch and prepared to enjoy a lengthy retelling of the goat escapade. She knew the whole story now. She had interviewed Sister Catherine about it last Sunday, and when she got home from church, she spent an hour carefully writing it down. Of course, she didn't plan to tell Macrina that this was her story for the celebration book. Macrina had never told Grace what story she was writing, so Grace wasn't going to tell Macrina either. She was just going to tell Macrina what she missed by being sick because it was too good a story to keep to herself, and she was positive Macrina would be interested. Macrina would be stunned. Grace sat down at the long table at the end of the refectory where the children always gathered to eat their lunch together. Conversations at the children's table were always more interesting than those at the grown-up tables, at least in the opinion of the children. Grace saw Macrina approaching. She scooted herself in from the end of the bench, making room. Macrina placed her tray neatly on the table and seated herself daintily on the end of the bench. Grace started her story as soon as prayers were over. "You know what happened while you were gone?" Macrina fixed her eyes on Grace's face. "In your card, you said something happened in Sunday school." She picked up her fork and took a bite of rice without moving her eyes. Grace took a large gulp of juice and set her cup down with a bang. "The goats got out, and everyone in the whole class ran away." "What?" Macrina dropped her fork. It clattered onto the floor, and she had to go get a clean one. Macrina never ran indoors, but Grace noticed she walked very quickly back to the table, clutching the new fork tightly in her hand. Macrina whisked into her seat. "2 goats," said Grace. "But we didn't know that at first. Saucer got up and ran away from the window all of a sudden, and Sam went out to see why Saucer left. Macrina nodded, chewing quickly and politely with her mouth closed. So then, continued Grace, we all got chairs to stand on and smashed our faces against the window so we could see where Sam and Saucer went. At least, Elias and the taller kids smashed their faces, she amended. I couldn't reach, so I had to keep asking what they could see. But, spluttered Macrina. So then Elias saw Saucer herding goats, and it was 2 goats who escaped out of the goat pen. Saucer was running around biting at their legs to make them go back home, and it was awesome. All the kids just jumped right off the chairs and ran outside to see. Macrina almost choked on her food. They ran after goats? Right in the middle of class? What about Sister Anna? Grace paused. She couldn't remember anything about Sister Anna at all. I don't know. She was there. I mean, she's always there, isn't she? But we were all excited about the goats, so we just ran. Macrina opened and shut her mouth several times. It looked like she had so many things to say that she couldn't decide what to say first. Grace was pleased. This was the first time she had talked to Macrina that Macrina had actually been interested in what she had to say. Grace's mother was always pointing out how nice it would be for the girls to be friends, since they lived next door to each other and were only a year apart in age. But up until now, Grace had been doubtful that it would work. But what happened? Asked Macrina. Did you go back to class? No, we went to see the goats. And don't worry, Saucer chased them all the way back to their pen. I saw Sister Catherine putting them back in and shutting the gate. Yes, but didn't you all get in trouble? Grace shook her head. No, we didn't. Now that she thought about it, Grace realized that was surprising. Didn't the parents know? Asked Macrina incredulously. The whole class ran outside chasing goats and nobody noticed? We didn't actually chase the goats, Grace pointed out. We just watched Saucer chase them. At least, some of us did. Some of the kids just went to play tag, I think. Tag! Macrina set down her fork so it wouldn't go flying and turned herself in her seat so she could look at Grace full on. That's so mean! How do you think Sister Anna felt when everyone ran away from her class? I can't believe none of you got in trouble. The parents didn't know. That's the only explanation. Sister Anna was too nice to tell them,